All right, Rev students, how you guys doing? Yeah, mildly excited. Well, we are in our last week of Welcome to the Revolution. I'm not sure how you guys feel about that. I'm not sure if you guys are ever happy or sad as we move from one series to another. I particularly am partial to this series. I have a lot of fun. We do this. This is our second year doing it. I'm always excited, especially just because the vision behind it, that you are being invited into the revolution that Jesus is doing. He has invited you into it. That gets me excited. I'm not sure about you, but this is our last week of it. So it's a little bit sad along the same lines. Just to catch you up, if you haven't been here, the word revolution means a sudden, marked change, and that's exactly what happens to us as we encounter Jesus, that he begins to change our life drastically. And the way we look at that, the way we think about that here at Revolution Church is through the acronym GROW. And so we have that up on the screen for you, the acronym GROW. And so what we said our first week, the G stands for the gospel, and that the life-changing power of the gospel gives us hope. And then the G goes to the R for relationships, and that healthy relationships have Jesus at the center. And then from relationships to obedience, that obedience is an opportunity for us to live and look like Jesus. And all of those have kind of built on each other. We can't do relationships right without the gospel, and we can't be obedient because a lot of the areas that he has asked us to be obedient in is with relationships with other people. And so we can't do that without relationship. And it kind of ends today with works, that he wants us to go out and take what we've been learning and take what we've been building, and that we would work out our faith with the things that he does for us. And so with that, I want to help you understand what I mean when I say the word works. Maybe you're confused. When we talk about works, we're talking about physical acts with spiritual results. Physical acts with spiritual results. And there's a lot of you that do works all the time. Maybe you're on a serving team here at Revolution Church. Raise your hand if you're here on a serving team. Maybe you serve in kids or you serve in student ambassadors. A lot of you guys do works. You do physical acts with the hope and the prayer that there's going to be a spiritual result on the other side of it. And that is what God has called us to do. And my hope and my prayer for us is that as we dive into his word today, as we begin to look at that we see that God has so much planned for us to do. He has invited us in. The revolution that he has invited us into is the opportunity to do amazing things for him, and he wants us to be a part of it. So I'm excited about that. I hope you are too. A lot of times when we talk about things like serving or doing works or doing the things that God has called us to do, a lot of times, especially people your age, the first thing that I hear is, well, what if I'm not good enough? Or what if I don't know enough? Or what if they ask me something that I don't know the answer to? Or what if they get upset at me while I'm doing the thing? And those are all real concerns. Those are all real questions. But my hope for you is as you see what God is up to, that those questions aren't as big of a deal because God is there with you in the midst of it. So we're going to be in the end of Colossians today, but we're going to start our time in Ephesians chapter 2. And I want you guys to read along with me. There's Bibles in your seats. If you don't have a Bible, bring one. If you need one, we would love to give one to you. Just come up and ask us about it. But we're going to begin kind of unpacking this idea about what does God want to do with our works, with these physical acts that we do, that we're desiring, hoping, praying for spiritual results. So Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8 says, "For by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not your own doing, it is the gift of God, not a result of works, so that no one may boast, for we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them." I think it's so crazy. It's mind-boggling when you think about the idea that God, the God that created everything, the God that holds everything together, the God for those of us who are believers, who have put our faith and trust in Jesus Christ, who sent his son to live and die for us, this big God that we talk about every week, that not only is he doing all those big God-sized things, but he is actively in the business of preparing works for each and every one of you. It says that he has prepared works when? Beforehand. Does anyone know what that is? Before. Yeah, so before we ever walk into it, God is already setting up the details. God is already orchestrating the things. And he says our part that we play is that we have to walk in it. We're going to come back to that idea later. It's going to be really important, the idea of what we're walking into. But God is preparing it. It's not something we're doing by ourselves. If you're saying, hey, I don't know enough, I want you to know God's been preparing it for you. If your concern is, hey, maybe I'm not good enough, I want you to know God has been preparing it for you. If your worry is that someone is going to get upset, I just want to remind you that God is preparing it for you. The only part he's asked you to play is to obediently walk into it. That's our part, that we would walk into it. And not only that, he says that is what we were created to do. It's not just that it's a good idea for us to do good works. It's not just that we should do good works. He says in Christ Jesus, we were created to do good works. And because we were created to do it, God is already in the business of preparing that for us. And I know there can be concerns and I know there can be a worry, but what I want you to hear is that our ability is not as important as our availability. Our ability in the moments, in the works that God has put in front of us is not nearly as important as our availability to simply walk into the areas that he has put in front of you. I don't know where that is. That might be in your home. That might be with your friend group. That might be on your team. That might be at your school. But he has prepared moments for you to walk in and simply be obedient. He even says that our salvation is not from works. He says that we have been saved by faith, that faith is through Jesus, not through our works. We can't behave good enough. We can't attend rep students enough. We can't do enough good things to save ourselves. That's why we needed a Savior. We talked about the first week. That's why this is all built upon each other, that we were desperate, like we were in the ocean, Titanic level disaster, desperately needing rescue, and God came in and he saved us. There's no good work that we can do that can do what he did. So we're not saved by works, but I don't want you to miss this. We are saved for works. We are not saved by works, but we are saved for works. That we were created for it, that he is in the business of preparing it, and he has asked you to walk into it. And so the question that God is going to pose for us is not whether we should or shouldn't serve or where's the best place to serve, or even that. The question that God is going to put in front of you is, where has he placed you to walk into? What is the place that he has prepared for you, that the ask on the table for you is to simply be obedient and walk into it? And so that's where we're going to get into Colossians, because as Paul is talking to the group of people in Colossians, and he has a very organized way that he writes his letters. He usually starts off very theological. This is who God is. This is what God has done. This is what Jesus did on the cross. And then he begins getting very practical and says, hey, this is because those things are true, because of who God is, because of what God has done. This is how you should begin to live your life. And he begins to talk about the area of works. If you have your Bibles with you, we're in Colossians 3, verse 18, and this is kind of where we're going to be picking up. He's really finishing his letter here. It says, wives, submit to your husbands, as is fitting in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Father, do not provoke your children, lest they become discouraged. Bondservants, obey in everything for those who are your earthly masters, not by way of eye service as people pleasers, but with sincerity of heart, fearing the Lord. As I was preparing for where we were going to go today and reading the verses around it, the next verse that we're going to get into is really the main part of our teaching today. But we always say that context is important. So as I was reading the verses around it, this is the verse right before what we're talking about. My first thought is, what does this have to do with our works? It's telling how wives need to treat their husbands, and husbands need to treat their wives, and children need to treat their parents, and all these different things. I'm saying, what does that have to do with works? And it dawned on me, I believe the reason that Paul put this in there is that you're never going to do a work outside of a relationship. See, when you are doing works, when you are serving, you're serving people. And you're always going to have a relational dynamic with a person. They're going to be a parent. They're going to be a sibling. They're going to be a schoolmate. They're going to be a friend. They're going to be an employer or an employee. Every one of us has different relational dynamics in this room. And Paul begins to look at the people that he's talking to, saying, hey, here are some of the relational dynamics that I see. And I want us to acknowledge them because it's important based off of where we're going, because God has prepared works for us, and they're going to be for the people he has put around us. They're going to be for the people that he's put in our schools. There's going to be for the people that are on our teams. They're going to be for the people who are in our neighborhoods. They're going to be for the people that come into our church. We're not going to serve people outside of a relational dynamic, and he wants you to know outside of every work is a person on the other side, a person that has a story, a person that has a situation. Like, we need to be sensitive to that. We need to be aware of that. He says there's always going to be a relational dynamic at play. And then he begins to give instruction. He says in the next verse, whatever you do, whatever the situation, whatever your relational dynamic is, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ. That word I have underlined or up there, it says work heartily. The reason, maybe that sounds weird, you're like, what does work heartily mean? That word means from the soul. That it's from the inside. It's the desires that we have, that we are doing it on purpose. We're not just simply doing it because we have to. It's not like when our parents ask us to clean our room, and we're like, man, I clean my room. It's like, man, I clean my room, right? I know some of you guys feel like that. You're just really excited to get home, clean your room every day. That's like the utmost desire in your heart to just clean your room, right? That's all of you guys. Raise your hand if you're a room cleaner. See, we have mostly honest people in this room. No, so he's saying, hey, that we would do this out of the posture of our heart, that this would be from our soul, that this is something we want to do. The reason I brought up that other text about the relational dynamics, I think Paul was very intentional here. He says, hey, I want you to work from your soul. The things that you do, I want it to come out of an honest place. And what I want you to know is that you're not serving the people across from you. You're serving me, because if you were just serving the people across from you, you might not do it. If it was just your parent, you might not do it. If it was just your sibling, if it was just your teammate, if it was just your employer, you might not do it. But if you're doing it for me, you need to do it from an honest place. It needs to come from your soul. I think it wouldn't take long for us to think about a relational dynamic that we have, someone who God has put around us that we would rather not serve, that we would rather not do works for. It doesn't take long for us to think of that. Here's the point I believe Paul's making here, is how we serve others is how we serve God. The way that we serve the people that God has put around us is the way that we serve him. Even if it's someone that we don't like very much. Even when it's someone who has done something to us at some point. He's saying the way that we serve them, we're not doing it for them. Ultimately, we're doing it for God. So that means regardless of what they've done to us, regardless of what they've said to us, that we can say, hey, I can honestly, from my heart, from my soul, I can serve you and I can love you well, because I'm not doing it just for you. I'm doing it for him. He says that it's from the heart. And so what Paul is painting a picture of here. He says that God begins to prepare these works for you. He is in the preparation business right now. He is preparing things, and he's asked you to walk into them. And as you walk into them, God begins to use it to do so much more than just the simple work. We do works, a physical act, so that God might do a spiritual result with that. And that's what Paul begins to say in the next verse 4:2. He says, continue steadfastly in prayer, being watchful in it with thanksgiving. At the same time, pray for us also that God may open up a door for the word to declare the mystery of Christ, on account of which I am in prison, that I may make it clear, which is how I ought to speak. So Paul had already been saying, hey, no matter what you do it like you're doing it for the Lord. It doesn't matter the relational dynamic. It doesn't matter who they are to you. It doesn't matter how long you've known them, how little you know them, whether they're above you or beneath you in some type of social status. He says, do it like you're doing it for the Lord. And then he says, and begin to pray that God might use it to open up a door for the gospel. That God might use our physical works, the simple acts that we do, and that he might use it and that we could see people saved because of it. That people's life could be changed because of it. That your friend that doesn't know Jesus, because of you simply being obedient and walking in the works that he has for you, they might see something different in you and see something different in Jesus and want to know more about him. That your family that doesn't know about Jesus can see the way that you live, to see the way that you're walking and say, hey, there's something different. And they see the works that you and God begins to use them to do something so much more. You see, our works are opportunities for God to work. And it doesn't matter if it's just serving on a team and setting up signs or letting people in a door or even other things that we do as a church, passing out backpacks and passing out Christmas gifts and passing out food boxes. All of those are great things, and we want to do those things. Those are good works, but we're hoping that God uses those good works to do so much more than just the simple things that we're doing. You see, we're not responsible for the results. We're just responsible to be obedient where we're at. A few weeks ago, we had one night. How many of you were here for one night? A lot of you? Awesome. I love that. At one night, how many of you picked up a one-night card and wrote someone's name on that? This is exactly what we're talking about. Did you know before you ever wrote that name on the card that God had been preparing works for you? And that you simply writing on that card, and if you've been taking that seriously and you've been praying for that person and creating opportunities for that person and showing Jesus to that person, that God can use that and he can save that person forever. That's so much more than just writing a name on the card. God is just asking us to walk into the moments that he's already created for us. But he doesn't just want us to walk in them. He says it matters how we walk in them as well. He continues in the next verse. He says, walk in wisdom towards outsiders, making the best use of our time. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person. We talked about in our first verse that he has created good works beforehand for us to walk in. And here Paul is coming on the other side and giving us instruction and says, hey, not only do we need to be obedient and walk in the places he has for us, it also matters the way that we walk into them. He says we need to walk in wisdom. That the people are going to look at us and they want to see if our works match up with our lives. And the area that he specifically begins to talk about is our words. He says, let your words be gracious. The word grace, we talk about that a lot here. It's a very church word. It means unmerited favor. When we talk about salvation, we're saying we have been shown grace because we did not deserve salvation. There's not one person in here that deserved to be saved, yet because of God's unmerited favor, we did nothing to earn it. He gave us grace and saved us anyways. And so when he says, let our words be gracious, he's saying we need to talk to people better than they deserve. Why? Because we've been treated better than we deserve. We need to talk to people better than they deserve because that's how we're going to show them our life has been changed by someone who has treated us better than we deserve. He also says that your words would be seasoned with salt. I'm not sure how many people like salty foods, maybe like a McDonald's fry. Any McDonald's fry fans in here? You're just like licking the salt off of it, right? You like after you finish the fries, you like flip it over, and anyone in here? So a few of you guys. So salt is supposed to really be a mild seasoning. It's not a very strong seasoning. The point that Paul is making here when he says season as salt, that it should be appropriate, that it should be reasonable, that it shouldn't be offensive to people. The words that we use, people should generally like what we're saying. It shouldn't be putting people off. Now, the problem with that is I've seen some of the way that you guys are talking to each other, and you guys are putting some spicy seasoning on your words, right? Like, I'm not sure what your spice of preference is, but you guys are spicing up the conversations. I personally like a lot of hot foods. I was at a wing place last Monday, actually, up in Young Harris, Georgia, and they we have world famous wings. Everyone says that. It's not a big deal. And I'm just like, okay, cool. I'll try your wings. And I was looking at the menu, and they have like mild flavors, medium flavors, and hot flavors. And one of the flavors was called like hot honey cabal, something like that. I was like, hey, can you tell me what that flavor's like? I might be interested in that one. And they're like, well, it's really hot, let me tell you. I was like, okay, well, tell me what's in it or what it's like. Like, I can handle some decently hot foods. And so they're like, well, it has honey, and it has this sweetener, and then it has death dust. And I was like, whoa, death dust? So I was like, well, I don't think I want to go like hotter than death dust. Like, that sounds pretty intense. So I'll just go ahead and take the honey death dust sauce, right? And so they bring it out, and I try it. And the waitress, she was like from like New Jersey, New York. So she was just kind of like smart with me a little bit. Like, I don't know, like it's a weird context. Like, I'm paying you money to serve me, and you're giving me attitude, but like we're just in an understanding that this is our relational dynamic as you serve me food. And so it's an interesting thing. And so she's just sitting there. She's like, so how is it? And I was like, I'm going to be honest with you. It's not very hard. And she goes, hold on a second. Donna, give me the hottest sauces that you have. And so then Donna comes out with 2 containers of sauce and put them down. And so now I'm like, oh gosh, now I'm really in it. Like, death dust wasn't hot, but this is the hottest stuff that they have. Now, I promise, I don't want you to think I'm bragging. I can't eat the hottest food in the world, but I eat some hottest things. But I promise you when I tell you, I tried these sauces, and they just were not that hot. And so at this point, like, I feel like I broke this woman's heart, because she was trying with all of her might to try and find something that I would like make me cry. And I'm like, nah, it's just not happening today. Like, this isn't it. Like, I've had hot things that do that to me. This just isn't it. It's a long story, but the reason I'm trying to paint that picture for you is some of you are talking to people like you're sprinkling some death dust on it. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're trying to make them cry. You're trying to bring the heat. And he says, hey, that's not how we're called to live, right? We're not supposed to bring death dust. We're not trying to hurt people and bring them pain. But that's how some of us treat people. That's why some of the words that we say are so pointed and so hurtful and harming. We know that because we've been on the other side of it. We've had some death dust spoken to us before, and it hurts. He says, let your words be gracious, let it be seasoned with salt. And listen, walking in wisdom isn't just about our words. He wants us to understand the importance of our words. It's usually the first thing people will believe and see and hear about us. He says our words need to match up with the way that we walk, but he also says our behavior needs to match up with the way that we walk. That there's nothing more frustrating for me and maybe for you is when you see people that are really that say they're passionate about one thing, but their life doesn't match up with it. Whether that's, sports, maybe someone's like, man, like I just love basketball, and like I'm all about basketball, and then you invite them to play a basketball game, and they're just not about it, right? Like it just feels fake. For us as believers, like I know for me, I encounter this a lot of people, especially when people hear that I'm in ministry or that I'm a pastor, and they'll be like, oh yeah, I've done this before. I used to be a part of this place, or I used to go to this church. I'm like, oh man, that's awesome. Like that's so encouraging. What has God been doing in your life lately? And it gets very awkward very quickly. And because the reality is Paul saying, hey, that when it comes to our walk and our works, that they need to match up, because people are going to see the works that we do. They're going to see the way that we serve them. They're going to see the things that we do. And if our walk doesn't match up to our works, they're not going to believe in it. It's going to lose its meaning. Here's my last point for you guys. Our works are only as real as our walk. And that's the reality for it. You can do the best things possible. You can go to other countries and live your life serving and helping people and never do one thing selfish for yourself. But if the areas of your life that God is calling you into obedience you ignore, God's not going to use your works the way that you want them to. God isn't going to bless your works if you're not obedient in your walk. And I'm not saying that that's what saves you. I don't want you to hear me wrong. I'm not saying we have to behave a certain way for God to save us. We've already covered that. He says it's faith, not works. But he says because we've been saved, we were created for works. And we have an opportunity for God to use those works to do so many amazing things, more than we can ask or imagine, more than we could even believe. But I just believe, based off of what Scripture says, is that God is going to bless your works as we live obediently in our walks. That we're not going to do all these things for him without actually living for him and spending time with him, letting him look at the hard area of our lives and saying, hey, your way's better than mine. I'm going to listen to you here. He's saying he's not going to bless that. So what do? Some of us need to evaluate our walks. If you're in this room and you're saying, man, I have people in my life I want God to save. I wrote down their name on my one-night card. I have people on my team. I have people on my family. Like, I actively think that there's a real place called hell, and there's people that I care about, and I don't want them to go there. And you're saying, I want God to do something about that, but you don't want God to do something in here. I'm just saying, I think he wants to use that, but it starts with you first. As we walk in obedience, he begins to use those works and does more than we can ask or imagine. Some of us need to evaluate our works. Some of us, God has gifted us and he has given us ability and he's given us opportunity, and we're doing nothing with that. And we can be as obedient as we want to in all the personal areas of our lives, but if God is asking us to step out and do something for him, we're being disobedient by not walking into it. Maybe he's asked you to be a mentor for someone who's younger than you. Maybe he's asked you to start a Bible study at your school. Maybe he's asked you to plug into your local church. I don't know what it is. But if you're not walking in the areas that he's calling you to, that's still disobedience. You can be the most moral person ever and still be completely disobedient to the things that God has called you to. See, that's why all these things work together. It's because of the gospel that we have relationships and that we be obedient, and that all of that leads to works, and we can't do works outside of the gospel. And we can't do works outside of a relationship with each other. And God is not going to bless those works if we're not being obedient in our life to him. So when you say, man, I want to see revolution. I want to see a sudden marked change in my community. I want to see a sudden marked change in my school, with my friends, with my family, but we don't want it right here. That's not the way that God says he works. He says if we want revolution outside of us, it starts with revolution inside of us. And as our lives begin to change, he begins to change the people around us and our friends and our families, and then our teams, and then our communities. But it starts with each and every one of us in this room saying, I want revolution right here. I want you to change my life right here. I want your way over my way. Because I do care about the people in my life and the people that you have put around me. And if the thing keeping them from knowing you is my disobedience, I don't want that on me. Now, and I'm not saying that God's not sovereign, that God's not saving, but he said he's created the works for you. You're the ones that have to walk into it. Maybe you need to pray and ask, what do I need to walk into? And we're going to give you lots of opportunity here. I have a QR code up on the screen, and you're going to have it in your small group folders as well. As you go to small groups, a place for you to sign up. If you're saying, hey, I want to be obedient to where God is calling me, I want to do the works that he's calling me to, you have an opportunity to sign up and do that. You can do that in your small groups. But God is calling us to do something because he did something for us first. And everything that we do isn't to earn something to him, but it's just in response to all that he's already done for us. He has been gracious, so we should be gracious as well. He has forgiven us, so we should be forgivers. He has given us so much, so we have so much to give. And that as we do that, God does so much more than we could ever imagine. I'm praying that that's true for you. Pray with me.